All right, let's get into it. So, we're going to be discussing the process of what it took me and my team to create the iGallanThac, all in Unreal. How we wrote it, how we developed it, and how it was executed. Now, this was a project that took us, really just 6 weeks to create, from the beginning to end. And that may seem, when you see the short, it's like there's a lot of content in here. There's a lot of aspects. We actually have a metahuman that's has what looks to be like a lot of animation, where it's actually a lot of mocap, and there's a little bit of animation on our face. We'll get into that much later. The environment, all the little props, the effects, the worlds. It's kind of endless. The creatures. There was a lot to deal with. So how do you create something like this from scratch? And how do you develop it? Say you give yourself 6 weeks to create a short. I think this is a good task, and I think it's always good to kind of put yourself on some crazy deadline like that. We kind of had no choice on this because we had a delivery. Um, but it was actually a good test, and also learned a lot in it, and I wanted to share that with you. And the big thing I thought was really exciting about the iCallanThac and what we were able to create in Engine is a really compelling story in that period of time, and how that developed as we went. The story was something that I had a basic idea of what I wanted to create in the early days, and I actually wrote it down. And it's very important. I feel like writing your story down is a good part of the process before you jump into it. You don't want to dive into something in Unreal, say as impactful or lengthy as the story that we create for the eye, and expect that you're just going to jump in and know what you're doing right off the bat, and what you're going to tell. So you have to. This is something that I feel is important, is at least rough out in a written aspect of what your story is going to be about. And so when I started to think about this, is I thought about the time that I actually had, what I wanted to tell. I wanted a human character. I wanted to use a metahuman, and I also wanted it to be sci-fi, and I wanted to be there to be a creature. Um, so coming up with a concept of a character that's actually in a spaceship. Her job is kind of a maintenance worker that works on um, down drones, and she gets a message about a drone that's down. It's kind of cryptic. It's hard to tell where it's coming from, and that part of it evolved as we went, as we started telling our story, and how it became what's kind of this interesting element of like a Twilight Zone. The entire story became a loop. But when I first developed this, I didn't have that ending. I just thought, I have 6 weeks. I want to tell a cool story. Even if it ends on a cliffhanger, that's okay. I'm glad that I actually was able to work with my team, and we developed as we went to tell a much more compelling story, and something that felt like it was complete in the end, opposed to just leaving you like a trailer or teaser. I wanted it to feel complete. So, but I had to be realistic when I started. So, again, I think it's important you rough out your idea, you start to write your idea, um, and you get your head around it, but then also get your team that's going to be a part of it, understanding what you're actually going to be developing. A lot of that you can tell them verbally, but it's always good to have some kind of document to refer to, and then you can expand upon that. So that was part one, is just kind of like sitting down, thinking about what I wanted to create. And what's interesting is I had some caves from another project that I've been developing called Dive. And I thought, well, I have these caves I've already built. Let's at least apply them there. That's going to save me some time. I'll come up with a story that deals with our character having to go through the caves for something. That way it's another. It adds a bit of mystery to the story, but it also adds like another environment that I didn't have to build. things like that are great shortcuts. You don't always want to just, you know, create a story around the things that you have, like in your on your hard drive or something like that. But I felt like that was something that um, just would benefit the story, and I already had it. So that's one component. Now the next component too is, and this is something I like to do, is like it's almost like a sketch, and that is basically creating a little teaser. So I'll show you the little teaser that was created, and it's basically it gives me an impression of what I want to create. And so when I created this teaser, here I'll watch it in a second. I'm just going to kind of, I knew that I already roughed out this concept, so I knew what I wanted. But before I dive into it, let's just watch it real quick. Okay, so let's break it down. What was behind thinking here, and why I do this? I feel it's important as a creative, not only for myself to kind of get an idea, sketch of what I'm going to create, but also to tell the team or whoever that might be a part of this process to see, kind of showcase like this is a rough concept, little teaser. Here's like the writing. And in this scenario, I was hired by Epic Games to create a short for their Halloween short nightmares, and it was going to be playing through Fortnite. So that's what this project really was about, is creating this short for that experience. And so when I was so this teaser kind of helps give me an idea of what I'm creating. It also gives them an idea about what I'm about to jump into. And so it's kind of important on several levels. And if you look at it on the fact that you may just be doing it for yourself, it really helps answer a lot of questions early on. Because and you'll see as we develop this, this short is that it constantly keeps evolving. But being able to have these tools in Unreal, and how this was created, I'll just walk you through, is that um, the ship was a turbo squid asset that I decided I'm just going to purchase and put it in here so that I can kind of light it and do some cool stuff. It's like the great thing about Unreal is that it doesn't take a lot of effort to really make something look cool because the lighting's so freaking awesome. And it's all real time, so if you're screwing up, you don't have to wait to render it. You just tweak it. I was able to add some, kind of cool effects coming off the engine there. There's a lot of great effects in Unreal. And then the background was these sky domes. This one's a space space one. I got off of the marketplace. And then you can go in and edit all this stuff and make it look really cool. And then this planet was actually a planet that's also a separate asset that comes from the marketplace as well. So all these things were like really kind of cool because I could throw it together like, and play in my sandbox, but also quickly sketch something out without really committing to anything. And that's the purpose of this. So, once we get past this, this was just an idea to kind of get a mood, a feeling. And in this teaser, you heard like the music was part of the mood and feeling. I wanted to kind of like get that across, that kind of creepy feel of like, alien world, out in space alone. So all of this helps tell that story early on. And I think it's important to be able to sketch stuff out like this. Now you'll see, like when the film doesn't look anything like this. Even the ship itself, what I found is, once I got into it, that this felt very military as far as the ship goes, and she's more of a maintenance worker or character, and we'll get into that here in a bit. But the world itself was a lot. There's a lot of mega scans, just various. Another sky dome that has animated clouds, which is really cool. Added like a bit of jet stream on the ship itself through effects that you can get, again, on the marketplace. All this stuff is really fun and cool. The lighting was just playing around with God rays coming through to see, is that something I want? And the ship comes through, the drone's down here. The idea was to tell that story that she finds the drone, lands close to it, and in the story, she would the drone was torn apart and pieces were looked like they went into a cave. So she ends up going into the cave to figure out what happened, if it was scavengers or what that carried this in. So, and then this cave again was what I had mentioned, where it's an asset that we had. So these like floating lights were just kind of a way to light it up. I knew that when I go into, if I'm going to use this cave, I'm going to use her flashlight and maybe some ambient light here and there that's kind of breaking through. But again, this was just a sketch for like components I was going to use when I pitched my whole story. It was very helpful and answered a lot of questions for myself. And I did all of that. Like I wrote the story, did all this stuff within less than a day, just to kind of get my head around it. Now, it evolved from there, but it's like, but it evolved very quick. So I highly recommend, when you start to your story, to sketch something out like this. All right, so let's get into what it means really, like to tell a story in Unreal. We open up project again. So. And the thinking behind it. So now that we saw the little teaser, we're going to get into more depth, but this was a modified aspect. The sky itself, the space was the same one we saw for the teaser, but I decided to modify it. What I found is that I know when to call it the eye. Part of it was several different reasons. One was the fact that I looked at this as the eye galaxy. It was going to be a galaxy. It was going to be my Twilight Zone if I continued making a bunch of these. And Kallenbach is this one planet. There would be other planets, other scenarios. That was just one concept. It's always a good idea when you're coming up with something like to think about the bigger picture of what it is. If it's just a short, like what its purpose is. What is it serving beyond? Like I said, this was for short nights, short nightmares. But I wanted it to be something more. I put a lot of effort in it to figure out it to have kind of a future. So beyond this, if it was something worth pursuing. So what's great about this, and we'll get into each component of this moving forward, is that all of these things, you can see the planet itself had altered from what we had before. And I'm going to get into that when we actually build our world, what the thinking is behind this, because I felt like the asset that we actually had for a little teaser wasn't as exciting as this, like where I wanted it to go. Part of it was cloud formation, has some lightning, a bunch of other little details that's happening. So this was more of a matte painting scenario, and I'll show you how that was achieved, and then get into how we actually build this world here. And so what I end up doing through the process is building these components as I'm telling my story. Is I sometimes do it at the same time, but also I do it in sequence as I'm telling the story, because that helps me understand what I want to achieve. So when I started developing um, the story in Unreal, as I was starting to build, okay, I'm going to start. I actually started here. I started in space. I found a ship. This is based. The ship that we have here it's a different ship than we saw, but it also was from Turbo Squid, but it was one that was heavily modified. We actually ended up doing a lot of changes to it, but it felt more like it felt less military to me, which is where I was going. Part of the color palette, everything on it. So as I move forward, as I'm telling my story, as I'm developing it, I'm actually starting off with assets that I can purchase or I can have in my library and modify. And what this does is it helps me out when I'm creating a story, not to spend a lot of time spinning my wheels on a design if I find something that serves its purpose. Because you can easily do that. Being in the industry for so many years and having to help big productions on designing ships and everything else, and we always find that we come back to something that was so simple and almost one of the first things that we liked. And so I'm a big component of spend the effort when you're designing something on the things that are really important that you want to tell your story with. So again, we'll get into a lot of the stuff, how the world was built and all that, lighting, everything. We're going to, kind of talk about all that and how I actually write the story by creating a lot of this elements and doing mocap on the character, putting it in the scene and doing previs, and then finessing it and starting to find in the editorial process where the story needs to be developed even further and where it's actually lacking. So it's kind of a fun process to be able to work that way, is to work in a way that you're developing it as you're going. And it's, there's a component that's very organic in that way, but there's also an element of exploration, and the beauty of this is that, that would be almost unthinkable in the traditional way of doing animation, because you think about all the rendering you'd have to do. It's like, well, what a waste of time that would be. But you have no waste in Unreal Engine because it's all real time. So I can decide to change my angles and just play it out, and it's done. It's not like I have to go render out a bunch of elements composited in, and then see what I have. It's like that's part of the beauty of telling a story in Unreal, is that it's almost like you want. How I look at it is I build my components, even in a rough state, and I start to create my world, my story, my camera, my action based on where I'm going with the story, and it evolves as it goes. So it's also it was gratifying in so many levels. It was a way of, because I was working fast, I felt like I was actually able to make quicker decisions and not be muddy them down with the technical aspects that come along with traditional animation. So now that we've gotten into a little bit of like what it is, like just the thoughts behind writing a story, let's just get into each part of it. So part of it we're going to get into is, kind of designing the world and figuring out what that is, because that's where we're going to basically start playing around and start to find our story. So let's get into that. All right.